During our Farm Basics time each week, we will typically talk about something we do on the farm and try to relate it to non-farmers. So if you are a non-farmer, you can kind of understand a little bit better just some of our activities out here in agriculture. But today we want to speak just a little bit more directly to farmers, especially when it relates to grain bin safety.
Well, and here's something that we all can remember from growing up about the buddy system, right? If you went swimming, well, you got to have a buddy with you. Or as you're crossing the street, you might hold somebody else's hand and have a buddy going along with you. It doesn't matter how old you are, you do need a buddy when you're working around a grain bin.
Well, it's not so much around the grain bin, I don't mind that, but I do mind it in the grain bin. In the grain bin, that's where you want someone else with you. And also, we would highly encourage you to have a harness system that's hooked to something either outside the bin or way toward the top inside the bin. So if you do get sucked down for any reason, you can quickly get pulled back up. It does not take long. It's just a matter of a few minutes and something can be life-changing, unfortunately, that could happen in that bin. There have been far too many grain bin accidents over the years, and that's why we're talking about it today. Even though I'm sure you've heard it a million times over the years, it doesn't hurt to hear it one more time as we go into this fall harvest season.
Well, everyone just assumes that what's in a grain bin is consistent all the way through, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Look at the harvest season that we had in 2019 and the variability that we saw across many of those fields. We had a great difference in moisture content, in the quality of those grain kernels going into bins in 2019. That sets you up for having some moisture issues, potentially some insect issues, and that could lead to problems as you're trying to empty that bin.
So if you're a non-farmer, what this really amounts to, and what we talk most about, is spoilage of the grain. When the grain starts to spoil, that's where we get things like crusting, we get plugging in that grain bin, and then farmers feel the need to jump in the grain bin, just like I have done myself in the past, and try to break up some of that crusting, get the grain to flow, get the grain to move out of that grain bin. So one of the things that we now do on the farm is put sensors into the bin so we can constantly monitor that temperature. That's a big indicator of whether or not we have spoilage and whether or not we have a problem. The other thing that we do anymore, most farms will have bin fan controls. So very easily we can have that fan going on and off based on whatever the temperature is and the humidity is outside, so we can have that grain in better condition for a longer period of time. You look at what happened this last year, grain prices crashed, so a lot of people like us, we were planning to sell our grain much earlier than we ended up selling a lot of our grain, and we still have some grain left from last year. Well, when you're going to have grain for 10 months or 11 months, there is a high probability that something's going to go wrong in that bin unless it's constantly monitored.
And we've seen so many new bins going up this year, and especially in areas that there weren't a whole lot of grain bins to start with, like the southeastern part of the United States, where a lot of the grain was going directly to poultry farms or to ethanol plants, and some of those plants have closed down, some of the poultry barns have had to shutter their production, and all of a sudden the grain demand just isn't there like it normally is. So we're seeing some new bins going up, and they're expensive to do, I get it. Don't skimp on the last few $100s to get some of these sensors that Brian's talking about. You're going to need those. And also, I know many times we neglect to read the manuals on things. Read the manuals so you can be safe around these grain bins so they're a blessing to your farm.
Well, once again, we would just highly encourage you, if you are a farmer and you need to go into a bin, have someone with you, have a harness on your body and hooked to the either outside of the bin or up high inside the bin so you can quickly get out if things start to go wrong. Well, one of the things that goes wrong, unfortunately, on a lot of farms as well is poor weed control, but we'll show you how to stop this week's weed coming up later in the show.